What if I told you that the way you talk to yourself shapes the way you live? I'm not talking about mystical chants or internet mantras. I'm talking about affirmations, simple, intentional statements that quietly reorganize our thoughts, redirect our focus, and remind us that we're allowed to evolve. At their core, affirmations are built on one principle: what we say repeatedly, we start to believe. And what we believe, we start to embody. The mind is always listening, even when we think it isn't. That's where the real power lies. But let's be honest, affirmations can feel unrealistic at first. You might tell yourself, "I am confident," while a voice in your head lists every reason you're not. You whisper, "I am enough," but your mind flashes to every moment that made you doubt it. This resistance is where most people give up, but affirmations aren't about pretending. They're about gradually introducing new truths that feel possible. Not perfect, not exaggerated, but believable enough to hold on to. Affirmations aren't about denying reality. They're about redirecting your focus within it. Think about it like this: every thought we repeat carries an emotional weight. Over time, those repeated thoughts create familiar pathways in the brain. The more you walk a certain route, the easier it becomes. Affirmations help us choose which mental paths to keep walking. When someone says, "I'm learning to trust myself," that repetition begins to form a new path toward self-trust. It's not instant, and it's not magic. It's gradual, like roots forming deep in the soil long before a tree appears above ground. The words themselves don't hold any power until they're backed by belief and consistency. If you've ever had one negative comment linger longer than 10 compliments, you already understand how this works. The brain tends to cling to what's familiar, whether that's a harsh thought or a kind one. So if you've spent years replaying old failures or labeling yourself with limiting words, your mind has simply grown used to that version of you. Affirmations are here to challenge that familiarity. They give your mind something new and better to hold on to. That's why someone who constantly says, "I always mess things up," eventually stops trying. That statement becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Meanwhile, someone who starts saying, "I'm learning to handle challenges better," begins to create a new narrative. It's not denial, it's direction. So why don't affirmations work for everyone? Often, it's because people start from a place of disbelief. They choose phrases that sound good but feel too far from their current reality. Saying, "I am successful and thriving," when you're struggling to make ends meet, can feel fake. The mind rejects what it can't recognize as true. A much better way to start is by framing your affirmations as movement, not as perfection. Try something like, "I am learning to attract opportunities that align with me." See how that feels. It sounds possible. It makes room for growth. The best affirmations are bridges between where you are and where you're going, not blind leaps into a fantasy. Another reason affirmations fail is inconsistency. You can't repeat something once in a while and expect your entire mindset to change. It requires patience and a lot of repetition. You plant these new thoughts through daily reminders spoken aloud, written down, or even just thoughts silently until they stop feeling like something you retrying to believe and start feeling like something you already know. That's the shift. That's when you make belief familiar again. If you're new to this practice, start with affirmations that sound like something your future self might whisper to your present one. Things like, "I'm learning to give myself more grace," "I am capable of growing through what I'm facing," "I trust myself to handle challenges better each day," "I am open to receiving good things," "I am worthy of peace and clarity." These aren't empty words. They're declarations of self-compassion. They meet you exactly where you are without demanding that you already be healed or perfectly confident. The form doesn't matter. You can say them aloud in the mirror, write them on a sticky note for your desk, or just repeat them silently when your mind starts spiraling. The point is to make them a part of your internal language. Over time, affirmations become less like a task and more like the tone in which you speak to yourself. And that tone matters more than anything because affirmations are really about improving your self-talk, that ongoing, private conversation you have with yourself every single day. For many of us, that conversation isn't always kind. We replay our mistakes louder than our progress. We minimize our achievements and internalize criticism until it becomes a second voice in our head. Affirmations are a deliberate rewrite of that script. They don't silence the old voice overnight, but they start introducing new lines and new tones. They remind you to speak to yourself with the same patience you would give to a friend. When you say, "I am doing my best," you're not being naive. You're being deliberate. You're choosing to stop waging a war with yourself. At some point, without even noticing, that new voice starts to feel natural. The phrases that once felt awkward begin to sound true, not because your life suddenly got easier, but because you stopped treating yourself like a problem to be fixed. You don't need an elaborate morning ritual for this to work. No candles, no crystals, no perfect meditation setup required. All you need is awareness, small moments where you pause, breathe, and choose different words for yourself. It could be the one sentence you repeat before a difficult meeting, or the one you remind yourself of when you're tempted to give up. It could be something you jot on a sticky note or set as a reminder on your phone. The point isn't performance, it's presence. When affirmations start showing up naturally in your thoughts, in your tone, and in how you handle challenges, that's when you know they're working. They won't erase fear or self-doubt completely, but they'll help you approach those feelings differently. The beauty of affirmations lies in how subtle their effect is. You don't wake up one morning completely transformed. Instead, you just start noticing small shifts. You recover from disappointment a little faster. You don't talk yourself out of opportunities as easily. You start giving yourself credit where you used to give yourself blame. That's the real transformation, the one that happens quietly but lasts longer than any temporary burst of motivation. With time, these new thoughts start influencing your actions. They remind you that you're allowed to want more, that you can begin again, and that you don't have to wait for perfect conditions to start believing in yourself. They plant small seeds of courage that eventually turn into real-world decisions, to apply for that job, to take that course, to set that boundary. The shift always happens first in the mind, and then it ripples out into everything else you do. If you've spent years being your own harshest critic, speaking kindly to yourself might feel strange at first, almost undeserved. But think about it. Harshness has never helped you grow. It only ever kept you stuck. Affirmations invite you to treat yourself with the compassion you should have received a long time ago. They replace the internal scolding with gentleness, reminding you that grace is also a discipline. No one blossoms under constant judgment. We grow where we feel safe, and affirmations help you create that safety from within. They soften the sharp edges of self-criticism and remind you that you're still learning, still trying, and still worthy. At their essence, affirmations aren't about saying things you wish were true. They're about remembering what already is true. The courage that has carried you through hard seasons. The resilience you've built without even realizing it. When you start affirming who you are and who you're becoming, you begin to see yourself differently, not as someone constantly falling short, but as someone in progress. You start showing up with a quiet confidence, not because everything is perfect, but because you finally believe you're allowed to take up space in your own story. Over time, you'll begin to notice a mind that feels lighter and a self-perception that feels kinder. That's what affirmations do. They help you build a relationship with yourself that's rooted in understanding rather than judgment. You don't need to be overly positive or spiritual to use them. You just need to care enough about your own growth to change the way you talk to yourself. Because every time you affirm your worth, your direction, or your progress, you're not just saying words. You're rewriting your story, one sentence, one belief, one moment at a time. For more videos like this, subscribe to this channel. Don't forget to like, share, and comment. Visit our website, thevirtualinsight.com, for more.